I haven't been introducing folks because what I've been doing is splicing this up and doing sort of a joiners table conversation, bits and pieces of interesting little clips.
Right.
Um, but I think it's interesting because, I had a teacher, I've had a few different folks, Tom Crum and some other folks, but you're different in a sense that we both went to the same school. You're a student of Aspen High, and I went to the same Aspen High School building that you went through. And
Right.
it's interesting too because I hung out with Mike, and I knew Chris. I'd see Chris around, and so I would say in a relationship, if you're talking about in TV terms, you're sort of a Greg Brady to my Bobby, age-wise,
All right.
And so there was kind of a very interesting, in other words, you're sort of a student in the same sense that we wrote about being kids growing up. And so
Right.
it's kind of interesting. Plus, you sort of took an interesting journey. You know what I mean? There was a group of every school, you've got different groups. You got your football guys, you got your tech guys, or your coders or computer guys. And then you've got your in Aspen and a bunch of ski towns, you've got your ski guys, and they tend to kind of float around in different things, but it's also a different world unto itself. One of the things I want to start out with, and so I guess what I'm saying is I'm here talking with Mark Tache, world-class skier, and grew up and went through the Aspen High School system. But what I'd like to start out with is you were born in Aspen, right? You were born in the Aspen Hospital.
No, no. Michael and Chris were. I was actually, so my dad was French Canadian.
Yeah.
And he raced here in the 1950 World Championships for the Canadian team. And then he went on to teach skiing. I mean, that's what those guys did to make a living while they raced during that era up in Sun Valley. And my older brother and sister were born in the lodge. Third floor was actually a hospital at the time.
Wow.
And that's where they were born. And then Dad had his own ski school up by Snow Summit, Running Springs in California. So he had an opportunity, he was down there. So I was born during that time. And then he was also apprenticing to become a PGA golf pro.
Right.
So that's where I was born before we moved here, when Dad hired him to run his ski school at Highlands in '61.
Wow. So the Tache family presence is a lot bigger than I thought.
Yeah, it's kind of has tentacles, but with that period of skiing, it was the main areas, Sun Valley, Aspen, obviously many in Alta, and it was a lot of the instructors at that time were immigrants, European, huge influx of the Austrians, the Swiss, and all that. And so if you look back at a lot of my friends or people in Aspen, the Scarringsons, the Nostals, they were all immigrants. Their parents came and taught skiing, and that's how they settled into Aspen, was that opportunity.
Right. Well, it's like Stein Eriksen was part of that crowd, I would say. It seemed like, the early.
Hugely. I mean, that's why Stein is why we are here. And he ran into Dad at a ski show in Los Angeles. And he said, "Hey, look, would you like to?" And it was a bummer for Mom. Mom has finally had a nice house after running around everywhere. Everything was cool. And he was working as an assistant pro. She knew right away when Stein said, "Hey, you want to meet me for dinner?" And he came back and had this opportunity. So the rest is history. Loaded up a car and had a crummy house a block from the Forest Service there. That was the first place we lived when we moved. And
I literally lived 4 houses down from the Cemetery Lane house that you guys lived on.
All right.
Right there. So
we moved out there in 60 65 or 66.
Oh, wow. You were there way before us.
And there was nothing out there. In fact, on the west side of the Cemetery Lane Road was all fields that the Deans, the T-Lazy 7 guys would come out and they'd bale hay, and there was a bunch string of ponds out there. Just a great place to grow up.
Wow, yeah, I know. Well, you had the view. You had Shadow Mountain on one side, you had Highlands, you had Pyramid Peak, and then you had Buttermilk and Snowmass off on the distance. So you literally had the view of everything there, whereas everybody else is up on Red Mountain looking at Aspen Mountain. That's all they get. Whereas out on the golf course, you got it all. You got the whole spans, right. You know? It was awesome.
Of course, at that time, it seemed like we were so far out of town.
Yeah. It's true. Well, I grew up in LA. Before we went to Aspen, I lived in LA, and so I would ride all the way down to Santa Monica with my bike. That was some of the first bike rides I do. So when I got into Aspen, it was, you could take those back streets a little bit. Once you got across that bridge, you could kind of go through the neighborhoods, and it was it was definitely way better than to go trying to sneak through different neighborhoods in LA. Some places you're like,